There's a moment that happens on Sunday evenings where you're lying in bed and
Monday
the
used to
weight
fill
of
me with
Monday
dread
morning starts
until I
pressing
started
down
my
on your
payday
chest.
routine.
Not because the
It
work is
only takes a
hard,
few minutes to
not even
organize
because
your
you hate
money.
your job, but because you realize that you have no choice. You have to show up, you have to earn. You have to keep doing this for another 30 years, maybe 40, and hope you make it to retirement with something left. And somewhere in that moment, you wonder, how much would I actually need to walk away to just stop? My name is Anderson, and I've spent years studying the gap between what people think financial freedom requires and what it actually requires. And here's what I've learned. Most people drastically overestimate the number. They think they need $2 million, $3 million, maybe $5 million to never work again. But the math tells a different story. A story where $500,000 deployed correctly can generate enough income that work becomes optional, not forever stretched thin, not barely scraping by, actually optional. Now, I know what you're thinking. Anderson, that's absurd. $500,000 isn't enough. Everyone knows you need millions to retire. But here's the thing most people miss. Financial freedom isn't about the size of the pile. It's about the size of the gap between what your money generates and what your life costs. And that gap, for most people, it's much smaller than they think. The difference between someone who needs $5 million and someone who needs $500,000 isn't income, it's lifestyle. It's the ability to separate what you actually need from what you've been conditioned to want. Today, I'm going to show you the exact math of how $500,000 can buy you complete freedom. Not theoretical freedom, actual freedom. The kind where you wake up without an alarm and decide what your day looks like. But more importantly, I'm going to show you why most people will never get there, not because they can't save the money, but because they can't control the one variable that determines everything, themselves. Let's start with the core math, because this is where most people's assumptions break down. Take $500,000 and invest it in a diversified portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, something conservative but with growth potential. Historically, this kind of allocation returns about 7% to 8% annually over long periods. Let's be conservative and use 7%. That's $35,000 a year in returns, just under $3,000 a month. Now, here's where people usually stop me. Anderson, $3,000 a month isn't enough to live on. But is it? The median rent in America is around $1,400. Add utilities, insurance, food, transportation, and basic health care, and you're looking at about $2,500 to $2,800 monthly for a modest but comfortable life. That $3,000 monthly covers it, with margin to spare. And here's the critical part. You're not touching the principal. You're only living off the returns. Which means your $500,000 stays intact. It doesn't deplete. It just sits there, generating income indefinitely. This is the difference between spending down and living off. Most retirement planning assumes you'll gradually consume your savings over 30 years. But if you never touch the principal, your money lasts forever. It's not just financial independence, it's financial permanence. Now, let's address the obvious objection, but I can't live on $3,000 a month. I have expenses. And that's true. You do have expenses. The question is, are those expenses necessary, or are they just the accumulated weight of decisions you made when you thought you'd always have income? Let's break down what $3,000 monthly actually covers. Rent or mortgage, $1,400. Food, $400 if you're cooking most meals. Utilities and internet, $150. Phone, $50. Car insurance, $100. Gas and maintenance, $150. Health insurance, $300, assuming you're buying it independently or using subsidized marketplace options. Basic entertainment and miscellaneous, $200. That's $2,750. You're under budget with $250 left over for the month. Is it lavish? No. Are you eating out every night or taking European vacations? Also no. But are you free? Completely. You wake up when you want. You spend your days however you choose. You're not commuting. You're not in meetings. You're not performing for a boss who controls your income and, by extension, your life. That's the trade. And for some people, that trade is worth it. For others, it's not. But most people never even consider it because they can't imagine living on less than they currently spend. Here's where it gets interesting. The reason most people can't imagine living on $3,000 a month isn't because it's impossible. It's because they've built an identity around a certain level of consumption. They're not just buying a $60,000 car. They're buying the identity of someone who drives a $60,000 car. They're not just living in a $2,500 a month apartment. They're buying the identity of someone who lives in that neighborhood. And giving up those purchases feels like giving up part of themselves. But here's the thing, that identity is expensive. It costs you years, maybe decades of freedom. Every upgrade you make to your lifestyle is another year you have to work to sustain it. The person who can live comfortably on $2,800 a month can retire at 35 with $500,000 saved. The person who needs $6,000 a month has to save over $1 million and work until they're 55, maybe 60. Same years of working, same amount of effort, but one person spent those years funding their lifestyle, and the other spent them funding their freedom. Now let's talk about how you actually get to $500,000, because that's where most people feel defeated before they start. If you save $2,000 a month and invest it at 8% annual returns, you'll hit $500,000 in about 17 years. Not overnight, but not impossible either. And here's the part people miss. You don't need to start by saving $2,000 a month. You start where you can, maybe $500, maybe $800, and you increase it as your income grows. Most people get raises throughout their 20s and 30s. But instead of saving the raise, they upgrade their lifestyle to match. They get a nicer apartment, a newer car, more expensive habits, and their savings rate stays flat. But if you capture even half of every raise you get, redirect it to savings before your lifestyle expands to absorb it, you can accelerate your path to $500,000 dramatically. Let's say you start at 25, saving $800 a month. Every year, you get a 3% raise and you capture half of it for savings. By 40, you're saving about $1,600 monthly without feeling like you've sacrificed anything because you never upgraded your lifestyle beyond your initial income. That disciplined approach gets you to $500,000 by 42, and at 42, you're done. Not almost done, not getting close, done. You can stop working if you want to, but here's where it gets even more interesting. Having $500,000 doesn't just mean you can stop working. It means work becomes optional. And when work is optional, everything about how you work changes. You're not negotiating from desperation. You're not tolerating bad management because you need the paycheck. You're not staying in a role that's draining you because you're terrified of the gap between jobs. You have what I call walking away money. And walking away money changes your posture. You carry yourself differently. You negotiate harder. You take bigger swings on career opportunities because the downside doesn't scare you anymore. And ironically, this confidence often leads to better career outcomes. You get better offers because you're not desperate for them. You advance faster because you're willing to take risks others won't. So even if you don't retire at 42, having $500,000 means you might earn significantly more from 42 to 52 than you would have otherwise. The optionality creates leverage. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, inflation. If your $500,000 generates $35,000 annually at 7% returns, but inflation is running at 3% per year, doesn't that mean your purchasing power erodes over time? Yes and no. Here's why. You're not spending all $35,000. Remember, your expenses are about $33,000 annually. The extra $2,000 gets reinvested. Plus, if your portfolio is returning 7% and inflation is 3%, your real return is 4%. which means your principal is actually growing in inflation-adjusted terms. Over 10 years, that $500,000 becomes about $740,000 in nominal terms, while your lifestyle costs about $445,000 in inflated dollars. You're still ahead. The math works. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, but it's solid. And solid is what matters when you're planning to live off this for decades. Here's the part nobody wants to hear. The reason most people never get to $500,000 isn't that they can't earn enough. It's that they spend too much on things that don't actually improve their lives. The average American spends $10,000 annually on their car payments, insurance, gas, maintenance. Over 20 years, that's $200,000. If that money were invested instead at 8% returns, it would be worth over $490,000. You could trade 20 years of car payments for financial independence. But most people don't, because the car feels necessary and retirement feels distant. Or consider housing. The difference between a $1,400 apartment and a $2,000 apartment is $7,200 annually. Over 15 years invested at 8%, that's $200,000. These aren't small choices. These are freedom-level choices disguised as lifestyle preferences. And the cruelest part is that most people never realize what they're trading away. They're not consciously choosing the nicer apartment over early retirement. They're just spending what feels normal, never calculating the compounding cost. Here's what happens when you start taking this seriously. You stop being a consumer and start being an investor. You stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, is this worth delaying my freedom? You stop measuring success by what you own and start measuring it by how much time you control. And this shift, this fundamental reorientation of how you think about money, is more valuable than the money itself. Because once you've internalized it, you can't go back. You can't unsee the opportunity cost. You can't unknow what every purchase is actually costing you. You become someone who controls money instead of being controlled by it. And that identity shift is permanent. Now, let me warn you about something. Hitting $500,000 doesn't mean you're safe. It means you've built the machine. But you can still destroy it through poor decisions. The most common way people sabotage themselves is by treating the milestone as a reward. I've saved $500,000 I deserve to celebrate. So they buy a car, take an expensive trip, upgrade their living situation, and suddenly their $3,000 monthly budget becomes $4,500, which means they need to draw down principal, which means the money won't last forever anymore. The $500,000 isn't a finish line, it's a foundation. It's the seed that generates the fruit you live on. If you eat the seed, there's no more fruit. This requires discipline most people don't have. It requires treating your principal as sacred, untouchable, the money that generates money, not the money you spend. Let me show you what this actually looks like in practice, because abstract numbers don't capture the reality. Option A, you're 45. You worked hard through your 20s and 30s, saved aggressively, and hit $500,000 at 42. You quit your job. You move to a lower cost area where $2,800 covers everything. You spend your days writing, hiking, volunteering, learning skills you never had time for. You're not rich, but you're completely free. Option B, you're 45. You spent your 20s and 30s upgrading your lifestyle with every raise. You make $120,000 a year now, but you have $800 monthly car payments, $2,800 in rent, and $50,000 in savings. You're successful by external measures, but you can't leave your job. You're locked in for another 20 years, minimum. Neither path is wrong, but only one of them is conscious. Only one of them was chosen deliberately rather than just happening by default. Here's what I need you to understand. $500,000 isn't magic. It's not a guarantee of happiness. It's not the solution to every problem. But it is a threshold, a point where the fundamental structure of your life changes, where you stop trading time for money and start having time. And for a lot of people, that's everything. Not because they hate work, but because they want the freedom to work on things they choose, to pursue projects that matter to them, to spend time with people they care about without watching the clock. $500,000 buys you that. Not luxury, not status, just time. Pure, unstructured, yours to design time. But getting there requires becoming a different person. Someone who can delay gratification for years, someone who can watch peers upgrade their lifestyles while staying disciplined, someone who values freedom more than appearance. Most people can't do it, not because they lack the capability, but because they lack the vision. They can't hold the image of their future self clearly enough to make sacrifices for them today. But if you can visualize the version of yourself at 42 or 45 who owns their time completely, then $500,000 becomes not just possible, but inevitable. It's just math, consistent math, boring math, but math that works. And 30 years from now, when you're sitting somewhere you chose, doing something you want to do with nobody to answer to, you'll realize that the boring math was the most important math you ever learned. Your future self is waiting. They're either going to thank you, or they're going to wonder why you didn't start. The choice, as always, is yours.